Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The draft is less than a week away. Andrew Berry talked to reporters Thursday, and Joe Flacco was brought back. We'll talk about all those things, but the biggest and best news is the return of Dave Chudowsky. He was back on Go, the WKYC morning show this week, and is back with us after a long medical leave. Missed you, Chud. How you doing, bud?
Oh my gosh, I missed you too, Scott. I missed everybody, and it is fantastic to be back. Going on the air Monday. Just it's a reminder of I miss doing what I love to do. I truly love what I do. I love doing this with you. I missed it. It's man, it's awesome to be back. I think what I didn't realize, Scott, was when I went public with this, is I didn't realize how much support and feedback I would get, and I should have, because Northeast Ohio is freaking awesome. We know that. This is home. This is the best place that you could live and the best people. And I just didn't realize how much support and emails, cards, gifts. I mean, it's incredible. And, I thank everyone so much. It was a journey, but listen, and I think I told you this before I left. So many have gone or are going through way worse. So believe me, I don't take anything for granted, but but still, I had surgery, I had my prostate removed, and it was a big deal. And I'm going to share that story on the air in May. We're going to do. I'm going to interview. I'm going to interview the doctor that saved my life, the surgeon that saved my life, and we're going to have that on in May. So look forward to it. But thanks to Tom Withers for stepping in. I think I listened to all but one of them. But you guys did. It was great to keep up. It was great because I could listen to you guys and keep up with everything that was going on. So you guys did a great job as always.
Well, I'm glad you had all that support, Chud. Everybody missed you, you know that. It was good to see you on TV this week, I'll tell you that for sure. And your timing is impeccable. You get back just in time for the big NFL draft, and the Browns have the number 2 pick.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course I planned it so I'd be back for their Super Bowl.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was the best time of the year. So, yeah, I would say this: anyone who is going through it or has one thing about my situation was, prostate cancer. It's slow growing, at least in my situation of where I found it. So I had a little bit of luxury of being able to pay. I could have waited till the summer, but I highly advise if anyone goes through it, just do it in the wintertime. That's what I advise. Do it in the wintertime.
That's a good tip there. During
Yeah.
during March Madness, make sure you're home for March Madness.
Yeah, and even like yesterday, I finally got back out in the yard. I was doing yard work, and I thought to myself, I'm like, man, I'm glad I'm not going through what I was going through now. And I'm still a little bit in recovery mode. I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty close. I mean, there's things I'll be dealing with for a while. You can Google that if you want, but as far as recovering from surgery, and I hope to get back to working out here soon. But yeah, it's great to be back.
Oh, that's awesome, buddy. That is awesome. So you've had some time to think about it. Who the Browns taking at number 2?
I thought I was supposed to ask you that.
You probably are.
Well, so before, and don't answer your pick, I will answer that question. I want to know, do you think they know?
Yeah, I do. And Andrew Berry yesterday talked about, we're taping this Friday morning, on Thursday said they hadn't made a hard decision. He also said, but, I'm not going to be disingenuous. Obviously, we've talked about it and have a plan. So I think they probably haven't written it down like, here's our guy. But, they go on all these trips to see the top players, right? The whole top of the organization, Jimmy Haslam and Berry and the assistant GMs and J.W. Johnson and Kevin Stefanski and quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. They go to Colorado, Boulder for Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. They go to Penn State to meet with Abdul Carter. They went to Miami to meet with Cam Ward. And then they go and meet with all the quarterbacks too and work those guys out. This is all they talk about. I mean, if it's all we talk about and all my buddies talk about, then that they talk about it as far as, okay, we like this guy. So whether or not they've had who's the pick at number 2, I'm sure there is a feeling inside the building, and I would say that Andrew Berry is. I would say he's 98% sure who he's going to take it to, and he's leaving open wiggle room in case he gets offered a trade to move down.
Mm-hmm. So last week I was kind of in my mind thinking, yeah, they don't know yet. People would ask me what I think of it. Well, if they don't know, how do I know? But I do now agree with you, and I went final with that feeling yesterday after listening to Andrew Berry. I actually thought it was a pretty decent media press conference with him. Of course, he's not going to tell you what you really want to know, but I think if you read in between the lines, my theory is I do believe it will be Travis Hunter. Obviously, there's that wiggle room. I feel like it is going to be Hunter, and I felt like the signs were there from listening to him yesterday. And if it's not Hunter, then it was a good way of Barry making you think it will be Hunter. I just his answers, like I felt like a little bit of excitement from him about him. I feel like he answered a lot of questions about him, and honestly gave more than I thought he would when talking about him. And even talking about, playing both sides of the ball. And I just think that this is such a Browns thing to do because, it's never been done before, right? A player possibly playing both sides of the ball. It just seems so Browns-esque. And I just feel like I never fully 100% believed that they were ever going to take a quarterback at 2. I do believe the tea leaves made you believe that they were going to do that months ago. But who knows? Was that media driven? Was that from them? So I'm going Hunter, and I think that's what it's gonna be, Scott. But clearly, I mean, it could be Carter, it could be Shedeur. I'd be shocked if it wasn't one of those 3.
Well, I completely agree with that, Chud. And I do think there's a small chance they move down. I mean, that's in their nature to want to move down. I just don't think anybody's going to move up to number 2. There's most times when people move up early in the draft, it's for a quarterback. I don't think anybody's moving up to number 2 to get Shedeur Sanders. I'm not sure where Sanders is going to come off the board. From a big picture perspective, that is, I think, going to be the story of the draft, is where Sanders winds up going. Let's assume it's not to Cleveland. Is it to the Giants at number 3? Is it to the Saints at 9? Is it to the Steelers at 21? Or does a team have to jump ahead of the Steelers if they want Sanders? I think it's going to be fascinating to see where he goes. And, you talk about early in the process, it felt like a quarterback. And that's because they need a quarterback. They need a long-term answer quarterback. So it just makes sense to grab that guy at number 2. And we've talked about this, and I've written about it. It's the question of, do you force the quarterback? And I believe they've come to the conclusion that Sanders is not worth that number 2 pick. Doesn't mean he's not worth the 21st pick or the 33rd pick, but he's not worth the number 2 pick, especially given your alternatives, which are, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, 2 guys that most draft analysts consider the most talented 2 players in the draft. So I think that's why the Browns will wait on quarterback. I'm not saying that's the right move. I like Shedeur Sanders. If they took him at 2, I would not have an issue with that. I think he is the second best quarterback in the draft, and I think he has a chance to be a top 12 quarterback in this league. If they feel differently, then don't take him at 2. And I think they feel differently. So I think that's why I agree. I think they're going to go with Hunter. And Barry had no reason to not talk about Hunter yesterday because we assume everybody in the NFL world assumes Cam Ward is going number 1 to the Titans. Titans have done nothing to have people not think that. So the Browns are on the clock. So it doesn't hurt them to talk about Travis Hunter. I don't think anybody's trading up to number 1 to steal Travis Hunter away from the Browns. And by talking about him positively, I think you get some buzz in your fan base going, and it builds for a week until the draft. And then not worst case scenario, but the other scenario is, what if you talk him up and then somebody decides they really want to come and get him at number 2, and then you have that decision to make. And, I don't think it'll be the decision. I don't think anybody's coming up to get him at number 1 or number 2. So I think that's why Barry's kind of free to talk about Travis Hunter yesterday.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know if it's the right pick. I mean, I could make a serious argument for Abdul Carter. And I think, Scott, would you think Abdul Carter might be the safest pick of the three?
That's a good question, Chud. I would say, yeah, here's what I think about, where I think Carter has the edge is he plays a premium position, and receiver and cornerback are premium positions, but I would put edge rusher behind quarterback in my ranking of most important positions. So I think he gets a nod for the position he plays. And I think there is a projection with Hunter as far as playing receiver and corner. And you don't have that with Carter. Now, the drawback with Carter is he's dealing with the shoulder from the college football playoff, and he wasn't able to work out for teams at the combine or at his pro day. At the combine, the medical exam showed a stress fracture reaction in his foot. Didn't need surgery. Supposed to be okay with it. He went back and had the medical recheck at the combine. Barry said that won't necessarily affect how they view him. So that's my biggest concern is the injuries with Carter. And he's not the biggest guy. He's only 250 pounds. That wouldn't scare me away from drafting him. I think from a Browns perspective, and you have to be careful, you don't want to just draft for need. But they have Myles Garrett, right? So they have the best pass rusher in the NFL. Do you need to go get another one? Now, I'm not saying there's not great value to that, and I love the idea of having the best end tandem in the NFL, and I think that changes how you're perceived as a defense. I think all of a sudden you're talking about, hey, can they have a top 5 defense again? But you can also make an argument, well, you already got the best pass rusher in the league. You have some depth with, they signed Joe Shoyinka earlier in free agency. They still have Alex Wright. They have Obo Okoronkwo for now. They have Isaiah McGuire. Like, they can line up and play at defensive end right now, where outside of Jerry Jeudy, they don't have another receiver. I mean, they have Cedric Tillman, but the jury's still out on him. And then it's really question marks after him, where Travis Hunter steps in to your number 1 or number 2 receiver role immediately. And then you think he can help at corner. So I think those are all the things the Browns have to weigh. And again, you want to be careful about just drafting for need. But I do think that's part of the conversation, especially when it's the number 2 pick in the draft.
Yeah, and they got to score points. I mean, they didn't score points last year. And I think if Scott, did Barry call? I know I've heard. Did Barry call Hunter a unicorn?
He did, and it's not the first time.
And it's not.
Yeah.
So here's my thing: unicorns don't exist. So if you call a guy a unicorn, how are you not going to take a unicorn? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like that's a big thing to me. Unless again he's smoke screening and but I don't, like you said, I don't know what the reason to do that is. But here's the deal: the only way you pass on a unicorn is if you have the quarterback that's going to change the entire future and your franchise, which you desperately wanted. So if they don't think Shedeur can do that, then how do you pass on the unicorn? Now, if Shedeur in their mind was going to be Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, well, then obviously you pass on the unicorn to take the quarterback you so desperately need. But if they feel that they can get the quarterback later or next year, or it's some other way, I don't know how, but I'm just reading the signs. I don't know if I'm right. I'm just reading them.
No, I agree with that, Chud. My only, it's not only, it's a giant concern, is if they take Travis Hunter, which we think they will, as good as that, as much potential as that has, and I think with the excitement it would create, and talk about the unicorn and, oh my gosh, this guy's going to do what nobody's done in the league for 70 years. Like, the last guy to play, well, first of all, he wants to play full-time on both sides. I don't think he will begin his NFL career by being a full-time receiver and cornerback. And Andrew Berry talked about that. Like, you have to have a plan. I think you ease him into the second side of the ball. But let's say he becomes that guy, whether it's 20 plays a game on defense, because the Browns want to play him at receiver first. So corner would be his second job. And let's say they ease him in and it's 20 plays a game or 30 plays a game, whatever that is. It's still more than you've seen in forever, right? Mike Vrabel would play some tight end while he was playing outside linebacker. Deion Sanders would play some receiver when he was at corner. Champ Bailey did a little bit of that. But the last guy to really play if there was any good that I could find, is Chuck Bednarik, who played in the 50s. His last year, I think, was 1962. So that's forever ago since somebody tried to do this, which is why, it's not crazy to call him a unicorn, which is why it's a fascinating story. He's a fascinating guy. I talked to Pat Shermer, the former Browns coach who was Hunter and Sanders coordinator at Colorado. But I want to get back to the point that I almost lost, and that's even if they draft him, the question will still be to me, like once the Hunter buzz stops, it's, well, what are they going to do at quarterback? Because they still don't have that long-term answer. They have Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco, but they need a quarterback. And maybe it's, okay, they're going to draft one at number 33, and we'll talk about that. But my point is, if you don't get the guy at 2, the biggest question facing this franchise has yet to be answered. And we can explain why, and we talked about it they just don't have enough. They wouldn't have had enough love for Shedeur, but that's still an issue.
So you brought up the possibility of getting a quarterback later on. Name some of the QBs that they could possibly get later on, and do you think any of them could be the answer?
I do, and this quarterback class, when you talk to the analysts, right, the most famous guys, the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Mel Kipers, the Todd McShays, the Matt Millers of the world, the Dane Brugler does a great job with the Beast on The Athletic, his draft guide. When you talk to those type of guys, this is a down quarterback class. And I get it, because if it wasn't, the Browns would be taking a guy at 2, and the Giants would be taking a guy at 3. Well, last year, what was it, 5 or 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round, but the first, 12, 15 picks, whenever Bo Nix went to the Broncos. So I acknowledge this is not the same type of class. Having said that, I've watched a lot of the guys I'm going to talk about here. And I think there is potential for these guys to be strong starting quarterbacks. Now, you never know, but you don't know with Zach Wilson when the Jets took him at 2, or Trey Lance when the Niners took him at 3, or whoever it is, Josh Rosen that the Cardinals. So, right, there's plenty of big misses at the top. My point is, I think that guys I'm going to mention have a lot of potential. I would be, if you're a Browns fan, I think there's reason to be excited if they take a Jackson Dart or a Tyler Shuck or even a Jalen Milroe. Now, Milroe is different. He's from Alabama. He is an incredible runner. He's got a giant arm, super smart, and strong. But he's not a polished passer. He's not a polished reader of defenses. And it's going to take some time. So I think he's got the biggest ceiling. He might have the biggest ceiling of any quarterback in this draft. But it's going to take time. Whereas Shuck is going to be 26 in September, and not because he's been in college for 7 years, he's had some injuries. I think he can step in and play right away. And I like him. He's 6'5", he throws the ball great. Now there's questions about, when he gets pressure, does he stand in the pocket strong enough? Does he fade? And no, that's a legitimate knock on him. But he can move, and he can stand tall and throw the ball. And I think there's incredible value to that. Dart is younger, played at Mississippi, so there's a lot of throws where guys are running wide open. But he also makes throws. He's a good athlete. Questions about him are at the end of games, he had some struggles. Again, he might not be the guy that comes in and starts right away, but I think he'd probably play as a rookie. So each of these guys is different, but I like all 3 of those guys, and I think all 3 are in play at number 33. And then the deeper you go, a guy like Will Howard from Ohio State. I watched his John Gruden, Gruden's doing those quarterback camps again, and it was interesting, and now Gruden's dropping F-bombs, so I think that's kind of funny. And he loves Will Howard, and he said he has a big arm. I haven't seen it. My question with Will Howard is his arm big enough? I mean, he's a big dude. He runs well. Obviously led Ohio State to the national title game. But in the 3rd round, is Will Howard a possibility, and could he be like a long-term starter? Sure. I got a soft spot for Kyle McCord because he's the former Ohio State guy that transferred to Syracuse. I think he throws it great. So if you got him in the 3rd round, is there a chance that he could be good for you? And I think yes. So I think there's other quarterbacks that they can get. But the longer you wait, first of all, there's a drop-off in talent. There's also the chance that you don't get the guy you want because somebody else can take him. So it becomes riskier if you don't get the guy at 2, and then you kind of you're forced to take whoever's left. So, but if they get one of those guys, I think I like those guys. I just think you view a guy differently if he's taken at 33 or in the third round versus number 2.
Yeah. Which maybe you shouldn't, not you, but maybe the world shouldn't. But that's what we do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. Hey, Scott, I have to take this call. I have Brandon Wheaton on line 2.
He's my guy.
That's right.
I loved it, but I'll tell you what, I loved him coming out. I liked Wheaton. I got along with him great. Obviously, he was a big disappointment with the Browns, but he was turning 29, I think. So there's a difference between 26 and 29. I think with in today's NFL, I mean, it was a decade ago with Wheaton. I think he was 2011 or 12 when they drafted him. Quarterbacks play longer. Aaron Rodgers is 40, whatever. Tom Brady played in his 40s. Joe Flacco's 40. So I don't think turning 26 in September, to me, that doesn't take Shuck off my board at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, I just want to ask you this: and because we are talking Browns here, is there any chance that they could say we love Jackson Dart, he's our guy, and they take him at 2?
I don't think so. And if they did, like if they really loved him, if they thought he was not only the second quarterback in the draft behind Cam Ward, or maybe they think he's the number 1 quarterback in the draft. Like that's not impossible. Teams have different quarterback ratings. If they wanted to make that pitch and say, yes, Jackson Dart is the guy, we can afford to wait. I could buy that argument, Chud. I just don't think they feel that way, because if Jackson Dart were the guy that they were going to take it to, we would have heard about that by now, because I think it would be a stunner if they took him at 2. And I don't think you really want to stun people when you make that pick at 2. So I feel like there would have been a bigger buzz about Jackson Dart by now.
All right, we'll get back to the draft because there's more to talk about there. But let's keep the focus on the quarterback situation. Good points on Dart, by the way. But I don't think you've had a pod to talk about Flacco. I think you and Tom recorded before he signed.
That's true.
What do you think about that? I mean, were you surprised by that? And do you think that he was signed to come in and start?
Well, I wasn't surprised by it. The list of available veteran free agents had shrunk significantly since the start of free agency. And it felt like Flacco or Carson Wentz were the best 2 options. I like the idea of Flacco better than Carson Wentz. So I wasn't surprised by it. Andrew Berry at the owners' meetings told some reporters that he thought they were going to skew younger. So then I was like, whoa, how does Flacco fit into that at 40? But they have Kenny Pickett, who I want to say is 25, and then they're going to draft a guy. So, you're younger there. As far as the starting thing, Chud, I think it's going to be interesting. I would lean right now toward Kenny Pickett being the starter week 1. And this is before we know who the rookie is and how the rookie does and all those kinds of things. So if you're just talking Pickett versus Flacco, right now I would give the edge to Pickett, not based on their careers, because Joe Flacco's had a much better career than Kenny Pickett. It would be the fact that the Browns believe there's an upside to Kenny Pickett, and he's a former first-round draft pick. He's 15-10 as a starter, and they hope that they can unlock something with him, and he becomes a viable starter in this league, and maybe even a long-term answer, where you can't hope for that with Flacco because he's 40 years old. So the best you could hope for Joe Flacco is that he starts for you all season and you win 10 games and go to the playoffs. And we could talk about whether that's a stretch or not. But Kenny Pickett, if you as a team, as an organization, were able to unlock something in him, and he becomes the next version of the Sam Darnold, who struggled with New York and then went to Minnesota last year and then signs a pretty good free agent contract this year and I think he won 14 games with the Vikings last year. Like, that's what the hope would be. Geno Smith, who, struggled, didn't start, and then goes to Seattle and resurrects his career. Baker Mayfield, even, is another example of a high draft pick that, left his first team, struggled, and then figured something out. So that would be the hope with Kenny Pickett. So if you have that potential, then I think the Browns would prefer for him to be the starter and hope that develops. Now, if he's a mess in training camp or the offseason program or whatever it is, you know you have Joe Flacco who can step in. He knows the offense. He's had success with Kevin Stefanski's system. So that's how I view those two guys. And then whoever the rookie is will be a complete wild card.
Scott, I don't know if I'm crazy here, but I actually did not mind the signing of Kenny Pickett. I hope I don't regret this, but I think there could be a shot he could be something. I'm not going to, bet money on it or put my reputation at line. Not that I have a reputation. What do I know? But what I'm saying is I don't completely hate it.
Yeah, I get that, Chud, and I don't think you're wrong there. And there's reasons. Like I mentioned, former first-round pick, good record. He's got a bunch of fourth-quarter comebacks on his resume, and he was only, 2-year starter in Pittsburgh. He spent time with the Eagles last year in a good organization, won a Super Bowl behind Jalen Hurts. So there's reasons to be optimistic. But I have to counter with people in Pittsburgh hated him. Like fans in Pittsburgh were fine when he left. He's only thrown for 200 yards, I want to say 10 times in 25 games. He's only thrown for 300 yards once. He only threw for 2 touchdown passes once. So he's not lighting it up. Now, the Steelers had coordinator issues when he was there. The coordinator was fired during one of his seasons as a starter. The Steelers want to run the ball. So, but he just hasn't been explosive and dynamic. And we talk about what the Browns offense was missing last year, and that was it until Jameis Winston came in and threw all those interceptions. So I just would be cautious. I get it. The optimism's fine, and the Browns certainly have that, and they liked him coming out. They did a bunch of work on him before that draft in 2022. But I would just caution it with, we haven't seen it. And I don't think he's physically, he's not elite physically. Now, Andrew Berry said yesterday that they think there's more there. And as a runner, I think he's pretty good. I don't think he has a huge arm, which isn't necessary, but it helps. So I just have some reservations before I would get on that Kenny Pickett train.
Yeah, and it's not like we have this amazing offense for him to get around. So, well, you just burst my bubble. Okay,
sorry, bud.
I'm out on Pickett. I'm out. I'm out.
You got plenty of time to get back in.
Yeah, true. One thing I wanted to bring up too is the quarterback room. And is there a difference when you have Flacco, the veteran, and then you have the veteran Flacco, and then you have a guy, Pickett? Listen, this guy has made it clear he wants to come in and be the guy. He wants to start. So is there a difference in how you mold your quarterback room if you knew you were going to bring in a Shedeur Sanders with who you put in that room compared to, let's say you take a guy in the second or third round or later where the expectations aren't so high and maybe they can learn from these guys with experience?
I think that's a great question, Chud. First of all, I don't think and Barry said this yesterday, I don't think the Flacco signing affects what they're going to do in the draft at all.
Yeah.
But if you drafted a guy at number 2, and for these purposes, Shedeur Sanders, the expectation would be he comes in and starts right away. So therefore, I don't know if you would need Kenny Pickett, a guy that you think could be the starter. I'm not saying he hurts, that hurts to have him. I just don't know if you need that guy if you're 100% committed to the rookie at number 2 who's going to come in and start right away. Now, maybe the whole thought was, even at the time when they traded for Pickett in March, is that if you draft Sanders or whoever it is, you don't want to force him in. So you want options. And I think that's wise. I think those options, like a Kenny Pickett type guy, are more useful or more valuable or would come in handy more if you take a guy at 33 or you take a guy in the 3rd round. Or if it's Jalen Milroe at one of those spots, who we talked about isn't ready to start. Then it helps to have that younger guy who's been a starter in the league. Where Flacco, I think first of all, he can play for you, and he can come off the bench and win games and throw for 300 yards. We've seen that. But he also has the experience and the knowledge, and just having him in that room, whether or not he takes on a big mentor role, he's in the room. You can watch him study, you watch him prepare, you watch him practice, and I think that helps a rookie. So I think this is a good way to put together a quarterback room, and it's probably the best way to do it when you're not sure that rookie's going to come in and start.
A couple things I just jotted down. I things that I watch on social media or I hear that interest me. One of them was Barry when he was asked yesterday about does anything between, because I always laugh, what really changes? Because there's been no games since the game's ended, right? But what could possibly change your mind? And I thought it was an interesting answer. You know, he talked about I don't remember exactly how he said it, but just like learning maybe the guy's mental capacity. How did he say it?
He said mental, medical, character fit.
Yep, there you go. Mental. I mean, those are all great things. Great answer. I thought that answer was interesting because it made me think, oh, well, did they maybe think one guy a couple months ago and then things have changed from their pro days and meeting these guys?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if he was specific, like if he meant a certain player high in the draft, right? Or he just meant in general, that's where your board changes. Because it is all about the film. And these scouts spend their whole lives ranking these guys and writing reports about these guys and talk about their strengths and weaknesses. Where is a private workout in, Coral Gables, Florida, or Boulder, Colorado? Is that really going to change your opinion? Now, it can, and especially if you've never seen a quarterback throw live, which is why it's important for Kevin Stefanski to see these guys throw, because it does matter if you see a guy throw live. To me, that's one of the biggest post-season, right, after the season, things that happen during the draft process is coaches and coordinators and quarterback coaches get to see a guy throw live, and I do think that matters. And Kevin Stefanski stayed at Jackson Dart's Pro Day after they met with him in Mississippi. So I do think those things matter, and I think they shape the board. But when you're talking overall, up and down, I think most of the movement is when you talk to a guy and, man, there's a red flag for whatever reason, and or the medical comes up, or you do a background check and something, there's a arrest flagged or whatever. So I think that's more about what Barry was what he meant.
Do you think what do you take from Deion Sanders thinking that one of his two guys will be drafted by the Browns?
Yeah, I think he's right. And when I talked to, I want to get back to Pat Shermer in a minute too, but when I talked to him before the combine, his quote was, if you need a quarterback, you take Sanders. If you don't, you take Hunter. So the Browns are in a position where, and I think that's how they think, is Sanders is the best quarterback after Cam Ward. And if that's not the way you're going, then Travis Hunter is probably the most talented player in the draft. And I just think, I'm sure Deion is pumping up his guys, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. And at number 2, it's one of those two guys. And then the Giants at number 3, assuming the Browns take Hunter, then have to decide, is it Sanders or Carter, right? Because then they're faced with a similar decision as the Browns.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what do you want to talk about with Shermer?
Yeah, I wanted to get back to Hunter real quick because I talked to Pat again on Wednesday night just about Travis Hunter, because the last time I talked to him was mostly about Shedeur Sanders. And it dovetails with what Barry talked about yesterday. And, Barry compared him to Shohei Ohtani, the Dodgers MVP. And I've been asked a question because I feel like for Hunter to be the number 2 pick, he needs to play on both sides of the ball. And it doesn't have to be full-time, but he needs to have an impact on offense and defense, because I think just as a receiver, I don't know if he's a number 2 pick in the draft. And as a corner, I don't think it's just a corner. I don't think he's a number 2 pick in the draft. Now, just a receiver, maybe he's number 5 or 7. Maybe it's semantics. But at number 2, to take a receiver or to take a corner, you have to be great. And it's a Calvin Johnson type. And is Travis Hunter Calvin Johnson? Well, physically, he's not. He's 190 pounds, and Calvin, he's Megatron. So I think in order for Travis Hunter to be totally worth the number 2 pick, he's got to be a two-way player. So I asked Barry that, and he said no. And that's when he brought in the Ohtani comparison, because he said Ohtani is a hitter is great, and he won the MVP just a hitter last year because he had Tommy John surgery, so he did not pitch. And as a pitcher, he's great. And then when you combine it, that's when you get the unicorn. So I think that's interesting that Barry said that he doesn't have to have the two-way value to be worth the number 2 pick because he's that good on either side of the ball. I think that was interesting. And when I talked to Shermer about it, first of all, Hunter is adamant about wanting to play both ways and as much as he can. And I said, well, Pat, what makes him, why? What does it mean so much to him to play on both sides of the ball? And he says, I'm just reading a quote from Pat. I think he believes in his skill and ability, and he wants to have an impact in the game, and he feels like he can do it, obviously, on both sides of the ball. The competitor in him, that's the person. He's unique, blah, 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 blah. So there's a drive in him. And then Pat also said that the Colorado coaches made it happen, right? They allowed it to happen, and they recognized the ability, and then they figured out a way to how you're going to practice him so he stays healthy and he's has the ability to play as many snaps as he did on game days. How you meet with the guy, because you got to coach him up on offense and defense. So Pat took a little bit of credit for that, and the coaches that Hunter was able to execute the plan that he wanted. And then he stressed that whoever drafts Travis Hunter needs to have an open mind. I think he used that phrase 4 times. And the point is that he is so much, like you talked about earlier, Chud, Hunter is so much different than anything we've seen. And you said maybe the Browns will screw it up. And you have to know what you're doing as an organization when you take this on. And I think when the Browns draft him, they will have that plan. And it means he opens as a starter receiver. They figure out a way to play him at corner. They figure out a way to have him in both meetings. But you have to go into it knowing that he's different than anybody you've ever coached because you've never done this with a guy. And you have to be willing to stretch. And Andrew Berry said yesterday, we're not going to put a governor on it. That's the philosophy you have to have, at least according to Pat Shermer.
Yeah, that is some amazing insight right there, Scott. Well done. I really, really like that. And the first thing that pops in my head is, well, are the Browns willing to do that? Well, of course they are. Did you see the Deshaun Watson trade?
Right.
They're willing to do about just anything to get this thing turned around. Yep. And that leads me into my next question. I don't know if you and Tom talked about it. I'm not sure on the time framing, but did you guys talk about Haslam admitting the mistake?
Yes, we did cover that. Yeah. I mean, that was huge news, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, whether it was guys on the radio or fans wanting to hear him admit that. So, so I guess that leads me, are we done with Deshaun Watson? Because he was asked yet about him again yesterday.
I got a guy on Twitter that keeps pushing back because I continue to write who's likely played his last down with the Browns. So I haven't said that he's done playing with the Browns. You have to couch it a little bit. And he's like, they've never said that. Well, I understand. And I understand he's still under contract through 2026. But the Browns have been open about how they're totally remaking the quarterback room, right? They have Kenny Pickett. They have Joe Flacco. They're going to draft at least 1, maybe 2 quarterbacks next week. If they don't draft 2, they'll sign a young guy or somebody else to come in and be their 4th quarterback. And part of that is because Watson's not going to be ready at the start of the season. Part of it is because they are ready to move on. We've seen how bad this experiment has worked out. The owner called it a big swing and miss. So I don't think there's a feeling inside the building of, man, I hope Watson figures it out. Hope he comes back from the second ruptured Achilles and he can be the answer. I don't think there's anybody in the organization that thinks that. So if Watson gets healthy in October and the Browns are having a terrible year and everybody's hurt at quarterback, could they play him? Sure. That also would hurt their cause. They're trying to get salary cap relief on insurance based on how much time he misses. So that would hurt some of that. And then I think after 2025, they're going to try to figure out a way to be done. And not bring him back, not have him on the salary cap. If they get a big salary cap relief, then it makes it easier to move on from him. They can cut him, you save some salary cap space. So I would never say there's 100% chance he doesn't play again. but I think everything is pushing in that direction. So yeah, so I think we're seeing
Yeah.
the last of him, Chud. Not physically,
Mhm.
he's working out in Berea every day, rehabbing. He's posting videos, and he's acting like not acting like he wants to come back and play again, whether it's Cleveland or somewhere else. That's his goal. He keeps posting these motivational videos of him working out. Uh, I just think it'd be really difficult for this organization, everything it's been through, to go down that road again.
I think when you just said swing and a miss, I think we need for social media when his days are finally over in Cleveland, just put a picture of him or him throwing an interception with Hamilton in the background. Oh, swing and a miss.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
yeah, and I'm not, and like Haslam when he said swing and a miss, like he wasn't saying anything anybody didn't know. He just acknowledged what we all knew. And what I'm going to say is kind of the same thing, Chud. Where the Browns are with the number 2 pick, with no long-term answer at quarterback, in salary cap hell, which limits what they've been able to do in free agency, with an aging roster that doesn't have a lot of young, high-profile talent because they haven't had first-round picks in the last 2 years, it's all because of the Deshaun Watson trade. So if they're in some kind of reset or rebuild, and they would never call it that, but wherever they are now, in whatever struggles they had last year and whatever struggles they might have in 2025, and as they continue to search for a quarterback, is all because they blew the Deshaun Watson trade. And I think this draft, again, just crystallizes that. It just crystallizes that, and it shows you how bad of a deal that was.
Yeah. Well, Scott, I wanted to break down more of the draft and ask you about some other spots, but why don't we do this? Because
Yep.
I'm still in recovery mode. Like I just cut the front yard yesterday, but not the back. When I take the dog for a walk,
You're on a snap count. I get it.
yeah, I'm on a count, and I figure why don't we do another pod next week? Because something else is going to happen,
Yep.
and we probably should do something before the draft Thursday. So what do you think? Do you want to talk about the rest of the draft next week?
Yeah, I like that. We'll talk about it before,
Exactly.
and then maybe we'll hit it Friday. We'll do a quick who they took at number 2. Crap, they might trade up into the bottom of the right, so we could have a quarterback to talk about Friday. So yeah, we'll reconvene Wednesday or Thursday, and then after on Friday, we'll try to do that.
Yeah, we could do 2 quick pods as opposed to our usual marathons.
Yep.
But before we go, I did want to give you credit on this. I did it on social media, but nice call on Myles Garrett.
Oh.
When we last talked, I went 80-20 that he was gone, and you were right around 51-49 that he'd stay, I think. I mean, you 55-45. I mean, you hit it, man. I mean, I jumped from 90 to 80, so I started to do the signs, but not like you did. And there were a lot in this time. Said the guy. You deserve credit for that.
Thanks. I tell you what, I think what happened is he came to the realization they weren't going to trade him. So as we've gotten further away from his news conference after he signed, I think there was a feeling, oh my gosh, they sold him on some plan about how they're going to be good in 2025. I think it's less about that because I don't think there is this magic quarterback silver bullet out there that, he kind of gave Andrew Siciliano an answer like, yeah, I know what they're going to do at quarterback. I feel less and less like that is true. And he just came to the realization they're not going to trade me. I've always liked it here. I've always wanted to win here. They're going to give me a record contract. I'm going to buy back in. So I think it was more about that than, we're going to be great in 2025. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe LeBron, maybe he loves the idea of Jalen Milroe and that's who LeBron's take. But I just think it was he got talked into or by his agents or whatever. However the trade request came about. And I'm sure a lot of it was he was disappointed in the season. I don't doubt that at all. I know he wants to win Super Bowls. But somebody in his camp thought that they could force their way out, and then it became obvious that that wasn't going to be the case. And he said, all right, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to skip games. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to hold out from training camp or the season. They want to keep me. Let's get it done. And I just think that's why it happened. People could say it's about the money, and obviously the money is part of it. But he would have gotten that money if he was traded. He would have gotten that money if he signed an extension earlier. It was about, hey, they're not going to trade me, so let's make the best of this.
I agree 100%. Absolutely.
Well, on that note,
all right,
we should end.
Scott, yeah, this was fun. This was great. It was great to talk with you again, and thank you, man, for all the support too, checking in on me every week. Instead of you having to write to me, hey, you want to do a pod this week? You got to say, hey, how you feeling? Yeah, right. So I appreciate it.
My pleasure, buddy. It was great to have you back. Yeah. Looking forward to talking next week. I mean, it's here, buddy. The draft is here.
It's here.
Right. So I'm glad you're here for it. Glad everybody was listening again. We'll do this next week. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.